Hi, I'm Jimmy Kershaw, and now we're going to take the major scale and we're going to learn how to construct it. We're going to learn about the building blocks of the scale and the architecture of it. And the first thing to understand is that the major scale has a pattern to it. And that pattern is true no matter what note you start on. So let's just get right to what the pattern is. The pattern is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. Now, I'm going to say that a couple of times, and you're probably going to hate me for this, but there's a reason for it. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. One more time. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Memorize that pattern. Trust me. All right. Now, before we get to actually building some scales, and it's not as hard as you think, and if you've never done this before and you've never taken the time to learn your scales, and once you do, your musical life is gonna change, because understanding the major scale and knowing them is life changing. Because once you know the major scale, you know everything. So, well, you don't know everything, but you see where everything comes from. Because, I'll give you an example. I don't want to get too complicated, but if you talk about a minor chord, and you say, well, what is a minor chord? It's a lowered third. Well, what is it a lowered third from? It's a lowered third from the note in the major scale. So that might not make sense to some of you yet, but it will once you learn this. So the point being is everything in music theory comes back to the major scale. That's my point. So once you know the major scales, everything else will be a lot clearer. So now just a little review. So again, some of this is basic, but our 7 natural notes are the pillars of music: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So if you don't know that, now you do. And then we have whole steps and half steps in music. And it's very important to remember E to F, B to C. E to F, B to C are the 2 half steps within those natural notes, right? The musical alphabet. In other words, B to C, nothing in between, no sharps and flats. E to F, same thing, nothing in between, right? So when you're building these scales, if you have a little trouble in the beginning, remember that. Use that as your template. So with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a C scale, right? And you'll understand why in a minute. So, and actually before we get to that, the way I like to learn scales in the beginning is to pick a note on either the 6th or the 5th string and go up that string doing the scale, right? And then we'll do another fingering after that, right? But this will help you. Learning them on one string will help you to know the notes and to memorize them. So if we start on C, right? C is right here. So A, B, C. Now let's think of that pattern. Whole, half, whole, half, right? So C, we need a whole. C to D, that's a whole. D to E, that's a whole. That's correct so far. E to F, that's a half. That's fine. F to G, that's a whole. G to A, whole. Fine. A to B, whole. Fine. B to C. There we go. So in the key, so if I play that whole thing, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So we just learned a C major scale, and we now know that the pattern was correct. The pattern made the scale. And we also know that the key of C has no sharps and flat. That's why I started with it, because the key of C has all natural notes. And again, I know a lot of you know that, but some of you don't know that. And that's, again, important. That's important information. When you don't know it, it's very important, okay? So remember that. Key of C, no sharps and flats. And there's no rhyme or reason for why that is. That scale just happens to not have any sharps and flats because of the pattern, okay? Now, we're going to do the same thing with a few other scales. And I'm going to pick I'm going to pick some notes to start the scales with. They're going to seem random, but they're not. Don't worry about why I'm picking these notes right now, okay? It'll make sense later, probably in a future video. So the next one we're going to do is G, all right? So we're going to start on G. Now I could start way up here on this G, on the 5th string, but it's a little high because then you kind of run out of room, or you have to go really high up on the neck. So you're better off kind of staying in, in the first like 12 frets for now to learn them. So that's why I'm going to start on this G, okay? So I'm going to start E, F, G. So here's G, my starting point. So I'm going to go G. Now, again, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Remember that. Say that before you do each one. So G to A, whole, that's fine. A to B, whole, fine. B to C, half, that's fine. C to D, whole, fine. D to E, that's fine, that's a whole. Now, we need another whole here. We're on E. The problem is that E to F is a half step, so that's your problem right there. So what are we going to do? Here's what you have to do. You have to go E to a whole step, which is an F sharp. So that gives you the whole step to make the scale. And then you have a half step at the end. So watch this. G. I'm going to play it without the sharp. So when you hear it, hopefully you'll hear that it's not quite right. It almost sounds like a major scale, but it's not quite a major scale. It kind of sounds like one, but at the end, something's not quite right. So watch this. Now I'm going to do it with the F sharp. See how that sounds more correct? So now we've learned two scales with this pattern. We've learned the C major scale and we've learned the G major scale. And now we know the key of C has no sharps or flats, all natural notes, right? And what do we learn about G? One sharp, F sharp. That is going to be extremely important later. Now, let's stop and talk about something that I actually meant to talk about in the beginning of this. The word key, all right? So the word key could be a little confusing for some people. The word key simply means it's all the notes of the scale, right? So if I play the G scale, all these notes are in the key of G. All those notes, including the F sharp, represent the key of G. I call it like a family, you know. These 7 people represent that family, the name of that family. So that's kind of how I think of that, right? Those 7 notes are that key, right? Now, there's obviously more to it than that, but that's the basic idea of it. Now, the next one we're going to do a couple more, right? And then I'll tell you how to practice this. Because ultimately, you should be able to learn every key, right? To know every key. We're going to do the key of D major. We've done C, we've done G, and now we're going to do D. So now, I could start on this D right here, on the 6th string, but I'm not going to do that because that's kind of, again, it's kind of high, right? So I'm going to start on the 5th string. I'm going to start on this D, on the 5th fret, 5th string. So whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Always start with that. I'm going to keep saying that. So D to E, whole. Now E to F is a half, so we know that can't be right. We need a whole step. F sharp, D, E, F sharp. And then half step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B. Look at this, whole step to C sharp now, and then a half step to D. So now we know in the key of D, we have 2 sharps. We have F sharp and C sharp, right? Because of that pattern. Whole step, I'm going to do it again. D to E is a whole. E to F sharp is a whole. So that's one of the sharps in the key of D. Half step to G, that's right. Whole step to A, that's right. A to B, whole step. Now we need another whole, B to C sharp, that's a whole, and then C sharp to D, and that's a half. Okay? Now, so you might have noticed a pattern to this. You might not have noticed a pattern to this. If you didn't notice, I'm going to tell you. Our original one was C, no sharps and flats, right? And then I went to G, and then I went to D. And here's the pattern. Each one is 5 notes away from the last one. This is what's called the circle of fifths. We're going to get into that later. So if I start with C, right? So let's say C is the first one, and I count up, including the C. C is 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So C had no sharps and flats. G was the 5th one, and that's the first one that has a sharp in it. And then, so let's say G is our first one now. So let's say this is the G. G, A, B, C, D. That's why I went to D after that, because D was a 5th up from the G. And that one had 2 sharps in it, right? And that's what happens. You keep going in fifths, going around the circle, and that's how you learn all your keys. Now, it does get a little more complicated than that, but that is, again, the basic idea of how to go about learning scales. So you might want to look up the circle of fifths and get acquainted with that, and then you'll be able to apply what I'm about to show you to that for how to practice it. Now, so the next thing is when you actually practice doing scales, because right now we were just kind of learning how to figure out the notes in the scales, right? By going up one string, but no one is, unless you're doing like the, you know, the beat kind of solo, like how it goes up one string like that. No one's going to play, you know, a scale or something on one string. That's why we have multiple strings. So let's go back to a previous video where we learned the major scale 3-note per string pattern. And if you remember that video, we went over this. It was the major scale pattern, and then I had you going up 1 fret at a time, just as a technical exercise, right? What we're going to do is we're going to take the first octave of that pattern. We're not even going to do the whole scale. We're going to take the first octave, and here's what I mean by that. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The first 8 notes of the scale. Or the pattern, right? Because the scale really is 8 notes. But we're going to do the first 8 notes of the fingering, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to start on C though, right? So this is F right here. So we're going to move this finger. Watch this. E, F, G, A, B, C. We're going to start here now. And we're going to do the same pattern. So I'll say the fret numbers. 8, 10, 12, 8, 10, 12, 9, 10. And then backwards. Now, a little while ago, we went up, we started on C, and we said all the notes of C major. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use this pattern that we just went over and apply those notes to this pattern so we can learn the scale this way. So watch this. I'm going to do it over here again. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Now watch this. We're going to start on C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Now this is a really good way to know, like playing them on one string will help you to know what notes are in what key, and you can use the pattern to see it really easily. But doing it like this will help you to know the notes in each scale going across the fretboard now, instead of just going up like that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do G, right? So then why? Let's do a quick little review. Why are we doing G? Because we're going around in fifths. Remember that whole thing? So C is 1, C, D, E, F, G, the 5th note from C, right? C is 1. C, D, E, F, G. So that's why we're starting with G. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Remember why we needed the F sharp? For the pattern, right? You needed that whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. You needed the F sharp to make that pattern. So review that on that string, and now watch this. We're going to shift that scale pattern over to G. G, A, B. Instead of the C being on the 8th fret, it's going to be here. C, D, E, F sharp, G. F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G. And then do that with D and go around the circle of fifths, however many you can. And like as I said in a previous video with learning the fretboard, this is not something that you should rush. It would be much more beneficial to really learn, like say 3 or 4 keys, like, and really know them, than to try to hack through, 8 keys and not really know any of them very well. You're better off really knowing like 3 or 4 of them at first and really knowing them. So, like in other words, if you put on like a backing track in the key of D or something, and you have some basic D major chords, and you can go like, but you really start to know the notes in that key, and you do that every day for like 2 weeks or something, and you really get to know the key of D. And then you even try to figure out D in other places. That kind of thing. So don't be in a rush to learn every, I know I said it's important to know them all, but don't be in a rush to fill your brain with every note of every key, and within a week, it's not going to happen. What you want to do is learn to use them. You learn to use each one, learn to apply it, and then you'll just know them. And in fact, I'll say this: I'll give you some keys that would be, as guitar players, that would be really good to start with. C, G, D, A, E, and then those are all sharp keys, being the sharps in them. And then for the flat keys, right now, F would be a good one. And it's not to say the other ones aren't important. If you ever get into jazz, that kind of thing. Or, obviously knowing flat keys will be important, right? But to start with, just to get to know them, start with C, G, D, A, E, and then F. Start with those, memorize those, get really familiar with them, and then kind of branch off from there. So, well, that about does it. I hope you get a lot out of it, and we will see you soon. Have fun.